Happy Responsible Tourism Day, the day after Hangout. It is November 5th, 2015, and I am Ron Motter, host of Planeta.com, and screen sharing our Planeta Talks Hangout screen, and welcoming everybody. It's an exciting November 2015, and we'll be looking at events across the pond in England. There was a big Responsible Tourism Day award session yesterday in London, and it's Responsible Tourism Day, well, everywhere, and I would argue every day. But we're celebrating that here with Glenn Jampol there in beautiful Costa Rica. Pura vida. Glenn, how are you?
Very good, Ron. Thank you. A little bit wet and rainy, but you know, beautifully green and lush, so can't complain.
Excellent. We were just chatting a little bit before the Hangout started. Responsible tourism. Are we using that as a term in tourism in the Americas?
Yeah, this is a really good topic, I guess, because as we were discussing a little bit before, you know, there's a whole lot of people out there in the world, here in Costa Rica, Australia, Asia, who are just not completely happy with the terms we're using, like ecotourism or sustainable tourism or geotourism or responsible tourism. And I mean, I don't have any better replacements for it, but somehow there just seems to be a lot of words that get to one single final point, and as a result, I just always use responsible tourism because it encompasses everything else sort of in a really concise and short little phrase.
I like that. Yeah, I've been using it as well as a means of aspirational tourism. It's, you know, if you can have tourism that benefits locals and benefits the visitors, having that mutually beneficial system, then it's hard to argue against it, and it's a good catch-all.
Yeah, but I remember about 15 years ago or so when we were, you know, pretty high on our CST certification in Costa Rica. I mean, I think we still are, but we were really it was really a big deal for us at that time. The word geotourism was being thrown around a lot, and there were a lot of people that wanted to use that as the all-encompassing term. And you know, it seems like fads, these kind of titles come and go. So,
well, you know, as I recall, and you know, I have a specific memory of it. You know, back in the late '90s, the UN decided to have an International Year of Ecotourism, and that was going to be in 2002. But in the years previous, there was all of this kind of battling for creating names. And so, you know, Jonathan Turtellow from National Geographic created, you know, geotourism. By the way, folks in Australia also had geotourism, but that was focused on geology and geography, not the National Geographic brand. And then you had the folks like Harold Goodwin, who was unhappy with ecotourism from examples, particularly in Africa, that he wanted to know responsible tourism. But it seemed to me it was kind of like a clash of ego, people wanting to create a brand or a name for the type of tourism that they were going to espouse.
Yeah.
But,
yeah,
but I'll say this and I'll shut up. But if you look at ecotourism at its core root, if you talk about ecotourism benefiting the community, providing a financially lucrative business and something that visitors would want to come back to, that is responsible tourism. But sadly, there were a lot of examples where indigenous people, rural people were displaced by ecotourism, so that kind of soured people on the E word.
Yeah, it did, and I think the more that the whole tourism empire is starting to understand that the responsibility has to be woven into everything they do, it becomes more concentrated on, I have a business, and my business, I want it to be responsible, and I want it to be ethical, and I want to do all these things, but for me it's just a business, so I don't want to put a name on it. And if you want to give me a name, that's fine, but I'm actually just a guy who's has a little hotel, and I really believe in all the things that you're talking about, but it's really, for me, just good business practices. So you have that coming into it now. It's not, you know, to be really like generalized and to throw it into one polarized corner just for a second. You know, it started off with the tree huggers. I went to school at Berkeley in the late 60s. You know, I know this group. We were really a strong tribe of people. And now it's really changed a lot, and it's not necessarily about people on a mission, although we do have a mission. It's not necessarily about people that are trying to create their own kind of cathartic religious experience with tourism, which we are trying to do. It's like it's more of a well-rounded orchestra instead of the drummer, the guitarist, and the singer.
Well said. You know, again, before our chat began, you were saying you were talking to the folks at Cartier, and you'd come up with some good analogies and metaphors. Is the orchestra one of those?
No, it wasn't. That just sometimes I come up with these really great ones. Sometimes I come up with ones that people look at me and go, what? I have no idea what you're talking about. And I think, well, it sounded good in my mind before it came out, but it didn't work.
You can't please everybody.
No, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, yesterday was the big Responsible Tourism Day, November 4th, and I was entranced by the Twitter feed. There were so many really good tweets and messages, one from the award sessions and second from the RTTC collective, the Responsible Tourism Twitter chat collective, and they were talking about Responsible Tourism Day. In the past couple of days, did anything kind of catch your attention?
Mostly what has been catching my attention is listening to voices that I don't normally get to hear, or people that come in that aren't part of the circle that I travel in, because we all have it's kind of a big dance when you're involved with the things like I was involved with ties for many years now. I'm the chair of Global Ecotourism Network. We all have a group and we all have a dance that we do together, which hopefully comes out to be really a beautiful, impactful thing. But for the day yesterday, I was trying to find voices outside of that had some consciousness and some ideas about it. And that group from Cartier was one of the people. This was 6 graduate students at a university here who are working on certification and research about choices. And I think that what was coming out of them was more about just a way of life. When you start to go on a diet and you start reading all the stuff in Google and the literature, you always end up coming upon one of those sections that says you can't just stop eating for 2 weeks and then start eating again. You have to change the way you eat. And then even further on, they say you have to change your lifestyle. You have to consider eating as part of your lifestyle, and you have to learn how to do that. And I think that that's what's happening now, particularly with the younger generation, is that they're seeing it as a much more holistic, in its literal sense, holistic activity, not a focus for a niche or a marketing, hook. It's really just about the whole way of doing business, sort of like a way of life.
Beautiful. I want to thank you for that and remind people that we are welcoming people to post questions in the Q&A app. And many thanks, collaborator and catalyst Deborah McLaren is online, and she has a few comments. And she says, and I'll read this: I understand small businesses. I understand, but small businesses can be awful. I just had a horrible experience. I prefer for any business to promote their values, especially if they're doing something that makes their business stand out more and more customers demand it. So I'm kind of lost with that a little bit, Deb.
I'm not sure.
What do you mean small businesses can be awful? Or what are you saying there?
Was she trying to say small businesses sometimes are not the better alternative to big businesses, or that they're not always great? I'm not sure what that was getting at.
Okay, so type away, Deborah. Clarify yourself. my question though is, are we doing enough for small business? Are we seeing the small businesses at the World Travel Market? Are we seeing small businesses promoted on the official tourism portals? Are we training small businesses? The question I had with Rhonda Green from Wildlife Tourism Australia is, can we get more of the Wildlife Tourism Australia businesses onto Facebook or onto Twitter? They're kind of there and waiting for business, but they're not really articulating and shouting out to the world, hey, we're here in this place and we'd love to have you visit. We're not using that social web savvy of communication. But again, that's my view. What specifically in Costa Rica how are small businesses handling this? Handling the responsible tourism / ecotourism niche?
Well, Costa Rica is a very unique country when compared to all the other countries in terms of its small business factor in tourism, because 80% of this country's tourism is 30 rooms or less hotels, and as a result, you can assume from that, and probably would be right, that the vast majority of those are kind of owner-operated, mom and pop kind of places, and they work on the margin, which means they often end up being a salaried employee themselves of the business. They spend a lot of time there. They do a lot of things themselves, and their net profits at the end of the day are usually minimal, and a lot of times those are put back into development of their own products. So they don't have a whole lot of money to spend on, extraordinary projects, programs, like certification in some cases, or maybe marketing on a pay-per-click kind of program. And but what caused that, or what created that kind of niche, was that in the late 70s, early 80s, there was basically two types of hotels in Costa Rica. There were the big box, the Playboy Hotel, I remember, was here when I first showed up in Costa Rica. And, the other kind of what we call cookie-cutter hotels that were dotted along the route between the airport and downtown San Jose. And within San Jose, there were some small backpacker and mid-range hotels, that some of which still exist. And then on the other end of the spectrum were these incredible nature-oriented places, but were very, very limited in terms of comfort and meeting the expectations of a lot of their newer clients. They were okay for the particular specific niche that was coming there. In the case of Rara Avis, for instance, when Amos Bien started that, it was really people who could really hike in for 3 hours, who were bird watchers or that kind of person. And they didn't care where they slept because they were getting up at 6 in the morning and going off to a trek to some incredible place, which is still the case. And that is really great ecotourism in the original sense of the word. But there was a lot of people in between who were saying, well, God, I live in this incredible area, and people don't want to stay here because it's really uncomfortable. So I'm going to have my father-in-law help me build a really nice little cabin out in the middle of this, and buy a nice bed, and make it a little, and put mosquito nets, and things started to generate independently. And when we started in 1985, seeing this kind of very incipient group of people who are going, this is great, and we're getting people that are going to these kinds of places, but they're not necessarily coming to the coffee highlands, and they're not necessarily coming to the volcanoes to spend any time. It's really beach and full-on nature. So maybe what we could do is find those people that might want to go and stay in San Jose or in a hotel, and give them another option, which is they could have a place that's still small, very personalized, but super comfortable, and have a lot of cultural attributes. And I'm grossly generalizing here. Of course, you could find a million branches of what I just said, things that happened a little bit differently. But really, the boutique hotel idea, which was going on all over the world, really blossomed in Costa Rica, because those same people that were going for birds and nature and really wanted to see what was going on in this biodiverse country were getting a little older. They wanted to be a little more comfortable, and they really started to appreciate things like the culinary arts and the cultural attributes of a particular area. You know, the tiles in the church floor, the central market experience, and at night come back to a place that they can really relax. So in that sense, all of these kind of mid-area hotels, these small hotels, realized that they had to cover two bases. One was they had to offer and protect the environment that surrounded their place, which is why Costa Rica really grew so much in terms of green coverage over so many years, because that was their bread and butter. And they needed to make it a much more personalized experience for those people who were staying there, which is why, and Costa Ricans being such wonderful people, basically, and basis of culture, was an easy step. And that's the combination that happened, which created a sense of the need for sustaining that. Not only sustaining it in terms of building up an audience, but sustaining it financially as a small business.
Beautiful. I mean, I guess one of my questions is, if we look for those small mom-and-pop businesses in Costa Rica, are we finding the links to the posadas or the inexpensive backpacker places promoted on the tourism portals or in the tourism trade events? Or are we seeing the boutique hotels? Are we seeing those promoted?
I think in Costa Rica you're getting much more of the middle and upper scale hotels being promoted because they're the ones who are creating enough net profits to put money into that, marketing it back out. The backpacking places are more dependent on word of mouth. In some cases, you know, like adventure tourism fairs, and also for the younger set who are, in Costa Rica's case, a lot of surfers and water sports rafters. There's a community that amongst them, and they can talk to each other about that. But in terms of marketing it as a cluster from a country, they're generally not as involved, I think probably due to financial restrictions, as the more popular and more expensive boutique hotels that are doing some of the same things, but on a much more upscale level.
Okay. You know, what I see in working with Spanish language schools is that there is, to me, a sector that is grossly understudied and underpromoted by most Latin American countries. And the fact is that most Spanish language schools set up their student in some sort of a homestay or some sort of, very, inexpensive place to stay with a family. And what I have found, again, through experience and talking to the schools and, people who have been with Planeta for 20 years, is that often by virtue of learning Spanish in Costa Rica or Mexico or Ecuador, one's family comes along for a quick visit. So you can have this, person who stays at the hostel or at a posada, and I'm, thinking of, very good friends in Ecuador, in Quito, whose family comes, who the student's family comes, but they want to stay at the expensive box hotel or the chain with the cable TV and the forced channels of ESPN. And there's no kind of study or there's no sort of promotion of the synergy between those two markets.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's quite popular in Costa Rica to go and spend, 4 or 6 weeks at language schools here, and you stay with families. And most of the things that I hear are really positive. And there's one very, very close to us who we work with on certain community projects, and they're very good and very proactive and also very responsible in the sense that they want to nurture all of these kinds of programs like Bandera Azul Ecológica, the blue ecological flag for water, for conservation, things like that. But again, when you talk about business, if you're involved in the conversation about the growth of business, whether it be in Australia or Costa Rica or in Lapland or in Indonesia, you have to start out first considering how am I going to make enough money to survive? And if you get to that point, you have to start determining what things you personally or your business as a policy wants to invest in and what things they don't. And marketing is one of those things that may be considered by some of the lower end small businesses as being the last or the first on the list to be eliminated in order to survive. And particularly if they're surviving based on grassroots kind of marketing, which is word of mouth and free internet sites where you can list yourself and stuff like that. But when you get competitive to a certain level, in any business, under any circumstances, regardless of how responsible you are, you have to start thinking about how do I pay my bills and pay my employees and make enough money to maintain and improve my product. And I think that's where things start to fall out for the small business person.
I agree, and the big change we've seen in the past 20 years, 20 years when Planeta started and your operation started, online. I remember we were excited we could put clip art on a website,
Yeah.
and this went on till around the social webs era started in 2002, 2003, where you could put photos online, but then with Flickr, you could put photos in a very public place that you could also copy and embed the code, the widget. You could share these things in ways that you couldn't previously. By putting stuff onto Flickr or Facebook, again, we're talking about for a business, we're talking about zero charge. But you have to figure out, again, how you put this online. And again, this is my bailiwick of training. That people think that they can go onto Flickr and put something online and then it'll work, and it doesn't work that way. If you tweet once a year, you're not going to get interaction. If you put a few photos on Flickr, but you forget to tag them or provide a description, then of course no one's going to pay attention. It's going to be lost in that 5 billion photo slush pile that's online that site. But where is the training and where is the commitment to those small businesses? I hear this, but when I look around, I'm not seeing that any more in Nevada than I saw in Oaxaca. Small businesses are just kind of going, I don't understand it. And
I don't think it's any different here in Costa Rica either. But if you take a cynical point of view, which none of us like to do, but occasionally you have to it's like watching Fox News occasionally. You have to see what's going on. You need to understand that a government, who are the ones who are ultimately going to fund programs that would support small and medium businesses. In Costa Rica, it's called MIPYMES. That kind of energy that comes in to start pushing that is really minimal compared to the kinds of lobbying that goes on by bigger companies and bigger hotels and the pressure from the government to create funds. And, it's always about money. And even when they do these kind of non-profit projects, you have the triangle between Spain, Colombia, and Costa Rica, or you have one between France and Benin and Ecuador, or whatever. They're usually dropped by the wayside. There isn't a whole lot of energy put into supporting these kinds of small groups, and it's sad because that's a kind of experience that's really important and also nurtures a lot of people who in the future will be making bigger decisions on a countrywide scale. But I don't know how to tell you that you could get better marketing by putting your photos on Flickr or by writing a Twitter page every day or any of that. And as soon as you get something going that has a buzz to it, there's 1,000 million copycats who are doing the same exact thing, and it becomes kind of old stuff. So the question I think we're talking about right here is how do you market for success when you're a small or medium-sized business?
Love it, love it. Hey, if you've noticed, we're taking a look at the Global Ecotourism Network page. Um, is there information on this site about the upcoming event in Rottnest?
No, and there is a on one of the pages, I believe it might be the contact page. This is a very new website. We just got it up to get it kind of going. I think there is a calendar of events on one of these pages, and this is not on that page. Maybe it's in resources. And we're working on that right now to do an events calendar so that we'll have it all on there. There it is. So the Rottnest is not on there, which starts on the 16th, I believe, of November. Anybody who wants to help with information or resources or you know, essays about ecotourism, responsible tourism, sustainable tourism, we're open to that, definitely.
I want to take a quick look at your blog, and again, this is a new site, but I think you posted one of the more objective features on the pros and cons of certification programs.
Yeah, I thought it was objective. There have been some comments from people about that I didn't, that made it appear as though I was really against certification. And I've had to kind of backtrack a little on that to try to explain to people that this thing was really just trying to put a voice to the two sides of the issue that I've been hearing for the last many years about why certification is good and why certification isn't in terms of benefits to the person or the companies being certified. And I'm sorry, go ahead, Ron.
No, Glenn, what I find very interesting about this, you know, again, I think you did an exemplary job on doing pros and cons. And what I find just so stunning is the idea that the people who have been interacting with you on Facebook, I don't see any evidence that they've gone to look at this particular page.
Yeah, it was weird. I got an email from somebody who was really taking me to task for not supporting the GSTC, which isn't a certification system, it's a verification program. And I wrote this person a letter because I felt that they didn't really read it, but I wrote them a letter saying, you know, the people in the GSTC are all colleagues and friends of mine for decades and know them quite well and personally. And when I was on the board of TIES, I was a member of the original group that brought the GSTC forward with Rainforest Alliance. And I didn't mention even the GSTC, I don't think, in that whole article. So I don't know where that came from. But this was really to try to open this discussion up, Ron, about is certification really beneficial or not? And there's both sides of this issue coming up very strongly from many people that I respect on both sides of the fence here.
Well, I hear you. And you know, looking at this for 15 years, you know, it'd be great if we had a certification program that were really transparent and that could be authoritative or at least believable. But we don't see that transparency in the equation, you know, so that people will tell you this has been this has been certified or not. Here's the ranking, but how do you get there? You know, show us the proof. And if there are criticisms, again, how do you have the mechanism of delivering some of those criticisms? And I say this from hosting the online ecotourism workshop from 2000 to 2003. You know, we refuse to discuss this in public. So I'm always in favor of, you know, looking at this honestly and objectively, but it has to be in public. And here's a question: do you think this will come up in the discussion for the meeting at Rottnest Island?
Yes, actually, you know, Ecotourism Australia is certified by their own Australian certification program, and they receive money there. As we do in Costa Rica, our program is funded by and built by the tourism board, so same situation. I asked the people in charge of the conference if it would be possible if I could bring up this topic, not to rant against it or to rant for it, but just to bring up some of the concerns that are happening now, and they were very open to that idea. It's not without polemic. In 2009, at the Planet People Peace Conference in Costa Rica, which we do every 2 years here, which is really one of the best conferences around, we brought that up and had a panel of people who were really anti-certification, and this whole conference at that time was funded by the Costa Rican government, the ICT, who were the developers and builders and owners of the certification for sustainable tourism. So there was a lot of sparks flying in the audience with all the ICT, the tourism board, people sitting there, and people on the panel who were big business and also big sustainable tourism advocates talking about some of the negative things, and it was quite a volatile time. But afterwards, are you still with me, or did I lose you?
No, we're here. You have a little outage?
Yeah, just for a change. Afterwards, the tourism board said, there were some really good things that were brought up there, and we wish you would have done it this way, and I wish we would have been aware of it beforehand of this. And I said, well, how can you be aware of it? These are people coming on stage to talk about stuff. But it turned out for the better. So I mentioned that to the people in Australia, and I think it's going to be a pretty good conversation. I really honestly, and I'm not being naive here, I honestly don't understand why anybody would want to talk about this, because it's been such an intrinsic and important part for all of our developments as small businesses. I'm still certified by the CST, and I was a big proponent of it, and I still, am part of this system, this program. So I'm not sure, though, whether the benefits are worth it takes your certification. That's my question.
Okay, there's a little glitch here. Not sure on what side. We'll see if Glenn's frozen or I'm frozen. Never really sure on a Google Hangout about that. Questions are welcome in our Q&A app. Glenn, am I seeing you now? Maybe, maybe not. Have no idea. Have no idea who's live. Hopefully Glenn will be back. Promotional announcements. Yes, Responsible Travel Week coming up, February 2016. And in November, Dogs and Drones here in beautiful Discovery Park, Henderson. And next weekend, Friends of Nevada Wilderness hosting the Wild and Scenic Film Festival, November 13th. Okay, Glenn, come on back. By the powers of certification, I summon thee. I hear something. Is that you? Maybe, maybe not. The other big thing, I'm a big fan of information and lo-fi information. Dogs and Drones, we debuted what's called a foam board or a science board, basically an information pop-up museum showing off different things. Very, very pleased. Outdoor Nevada had its event last week, so I was able to take all the information that I collected on screen and again made it into this nice information board. Glenn has now disappeared in the Costa Rica rainstorm. And the question again is, how do we recycle this information? If we're good, practical environmentalists and conservationists, then we should be able to take this information that we get at trade conferences, outdoor events, whatever, and share it with folks. And I love the idea of a pop-up museum. Piece of cardboard folded 3 ways goes a long way of sharing information. Something that I use quite a bit in Oaxaca at the markets. Let's get the information out before events occur. So it is 12:46 p.m. We're about to wrap up the Hangout, but we'll just see if Glenn drops back in. I'm very impressed. Glenn's work. I met Glenn a few years ago, quite a few years ago, there at the La Barrios Eco Lodge, and later at one of the Ties events. And very committed, very practical, very objective person, and very excited. I am about this new global ecotourism network. So, best wishes to the friends and folks in Australia at this event in Rottnest Island off the coast of Western Australia. So, I'm just going to ramble. So sorry, folks. We'll see if Glenn comes back. Responsible Tourism Day, as we know, occurs every November. It's in tandem with World Travel Market. I use it as a way of showcasing what Planet.com has done in the past year and what we're about to do in the coming year, particularly with Responsible Travel Week. Try to translate responsible tourism and responsible travel into other languages as part of our effort of mainstreaming this type of tourism in connection with social and environmental benefits. People really won't appreciate this if they don't know what it is. And believe me, I love being able to speak in English and having all of this information in English, but I really wish that it were translated into Sami and Ayuk and Dina and Zapotec and a zillion other languages if we really want to make a statement that this is an inclusive invitation for tourism that benefits locals and visitors. So that's my 2 cents and plus. Nope, still not there, Glenn. These Hangouts, we're going to wrap this up if Glenn doesn't come back in, but these Hangouts are a regular feature that I host, glitches included, providing an opportunity to share information, have this sort of face-to-face conversation, mediated, of course, by different screens. It's a good option B if you can't meet in person. The other great advantage of these Hangouts is that they are recorded. Not that everything is pure gold, all glitter isn't, but there are a few segments here that I'd like to timestamp and say, hey, listen to this person talking about something very important. And I think these Hangouts this year have been extraordinarily successful in that regard. We've heard from Bolivia, Ireland, Ecuador, Mexico, United States, Canada. I'd love to hear from more countries, and we'll figure out how to make this work in the future. So close about to cancel this Hangout, to close this Hangout. But is there anything else I wanted to say? I want to thank William Clark for my coffee mug, picked up at the Native Innovation Educational Technology Conference in Flagstaff. Cheers, everybody. Ooh, look at this, marked on the bottom. And as I say, we have to find ways of connecting tourism to folk art and artisania, connecting tourism to the Spanish language schools and higher education. A student goes across the world, lives with a family. Family comes across, a student's family comes for a visit. They're usually staying at a fairly nice and very comfortable hotel. Do we really appreciate the fact that that family would not have made that trip if the student hadn't gone there for classes? There are plenty of ways to integrate responsible travel into other sectors. And fingers crossed, that's what we can do in the coming year. I'll leave you with this thought. In the year 2016, let's do a screen share, and then we'll wind it up. Share. Here's my Google page. If we look at 2016 on the Planet the Wiki, we have a calendar here. 2 events stand out in my mind for where we really need to focus on responsible travel and ecotourism. And there are events that are not tourism specific. Upcoming events. Let's use loads. Hopefully it'll load. We are less than 100 days away until Responsible Travel Week. That's February 8th to the 14th. But the events that I wanted to mention, are the events in September and December of 2016. In September, the IUCN hosts the World Conservation Congress in Hawaii. And I think this Congress is tremendously important to focus on responsible travel and ecotourism. Hawaii is one of the preferred vacation hotspots in the world, and it also has quite a bit of environmental and cultural sensitivities that we need to be paying attention to. So keep an eye on this, and hopefully Planeta can be at the forefront of providing coverage. The other event, take a look at December 2016, and that's the 13th Convention on Biological Diversity. And friends from the Convention on Biological Diversity are hosting this event in Cancun, Mexico. And our proposal our proposal is initiating a dialogue with the CBD about how to participate in the event. Secondly, how to reinvigorate or continue the ITBW award, that's the Indigenous Tourism and Biodiversity Website Award, and how we can collaborate and work together on updating wiki pages here on Planeta, starting with Cancun and the Riviera Maya. And this page, it's been edited 39 times, will be with information in English and Spanish. This page will be updated quite a bit in the coming months as we figure out how to showcase, the issues at stake and what we might be able to do as concerned people around the globe. So that's my screen sharing for everybody. No more questions, no more Glenn. I'm going to say thank you very much for your attention. I want to give a great big thank you to Glenn Pura Vida in Costa Rica and heading off to Rottnest Island. And we'll continue this conversation at a later date. Folks who are watching, please, if you can, like it, fave it, share it. Comments are welcome. And if you'd like to participate on camera, please let me know. Many thanks to everybody, and may your next year be full of wonderful, responsible travel wherever you go. Cheers.